Hi everyone, I'm Anne, and bear with me for a second because I'd like to read you a little something that I've been seeing a lot on the internet. Here we go. Practice the pause. When in doubt, pause. When angry, pause. When stressed, pause. When tired, pause. And when you pause, stay calm. I keep screenshotting this because I think it's speaking to me. But pausing is easier said than done, right? Especially when caring for a person living with dementia. So hi everyone, I'm Anne. Thank you so much for joining me again for another morning meeting for Dementia Care Partners. And today I thought I'd talk a little bit about the practice of practicing the pause. And I say the practice of practicing because even though we all know it's a good idea to pause before we react or speak or do something we're likely to regret later, it's often difficult to hold ourselves back from our first reaction, which I think is strongly based on how we've always operated in the past. For example, I think most of us have learned over time to stick up for ourselves, to be assertive in the face of a verbal attack or when someone else is angry with us. But in some or many forms of dementia, let's face it, a person is not always nice. But if we revert to our normal defensive way of responding, what often ends up happening is that response is counterproductive, especially when we're dealing with someone living with dementia. So you've probably been told not to take things personally when you are the recipient of an insult or are blamed for your person's loss of freedom, right? And I agree, this is correct, because a person living with dementia often does not have access any longer to the cognitive skills they need to read or remember or perceive a situation or a conversation accurately. So the lack of insight isn't intentional, and it's not denial. It's simply a lack of awareness due to a decline in their brain's ability to process information like it did before. And even though we know all this, it's still really, really hard not to react to offensive language or to automatically just spring into action when we see a mistake or a lapse of judgment happen. So I guess my best advice in this situation is to start practicing the pause. Pausing before we respond allows us to zoom out from a situation that's intense and stressful. When we do that, we can often get a clearer understanding about what's going on. And also, we can stop ourselves from reacting or reaching a judgment or racing to judge a situation as being bad and in immediate need of fixing. Because trying to fix or control everything is often not necessary in dementia. And it can actually make you feel really stressed or really sick. Operating from old ways and patterns often no longer applies. So for example, if I'm accused of being a controlling jerk or something worse because I remind my person that it's shower time, if I pause and zoom out for a moment to give myself a little space, I can allow my healthy brain to kick in and to remind me that this is dementia talking and not my loved one. And maybe, although it's hard, it may be best to apologize and try again later in a different way. And I know it can be very, very hard to apologize because you're right and they're wrong. But when we pause, we allow ourselves to diffuse our own anger and frustration. And sometimes we realize that acquiescence may be the quickest quickest way to handle a conflict. So practicing the pause allows us to, what I like to call, outsmart dementia. And it can help us lead ourselves and our person through a testy time faster. In my mind, the first step to mastering the pause is to become aware of how my body feels when I encounter an insult, being yelled at, or something else. And this can be different for everyone, but for me, usually I can sense my whole body start to tense up. My breath kind of catches and can stop, and sometimes I can even feel a pit in my stomach. So when I recognize these signs in myself, I've learned to take this as my cue to take a breath and pause. Pausing allows me to step back mentally and emotionally from the situation and put a little space between myself and the source of my aggravation. So I have a clearer mindset to start the problem-solving process. Pausing also buys me some time to figure out what's going on, to do that detective work, and how I may want to approach the situation. The very first thing I want to do is ask myself if this is even a problem. Is someone at risk of getting hurt? Are they at risk of hurting someone else? If not, the pause often allows me that moment I need to realize that I just might be better off letting the whole thing go. If there's a problem, on the other hand, that does need my attention, the pause gives me the few seconds I need to decide what to do about it, based on my past experience with my person, and my knowledge about them, and their preferences, and their likes, their dislikes, etc. If something new is occurring that I haven't seen before, I'm usually tempted to allow the scene to unfold so I can observe what's going on, including what may have set things off in the first place, and also if the issue resolves itself with no intervention from me. Okay, so once I have stopped and done some mental calculation to sum up the situation for myself, and again, this just takes a few seconds to pause and do this, I will say with 100% certainty that 100% of the time, the thing that I need to do next is to take a few breaths, because I usually am holding my breath. So we talked a lot about breathing and some breathing techniques in the last video session, but even just that simple cleansing breath can be very grounding. So I can approach the situation from a place of more stability instead of this frenzied fight or flight state. So what I'd like to do now is a little exercise to practice this a little bit. So please get yourself comfy and close your eyes. I'd like you now to think back to my very, very first video when I talked about establishing your space, what I called your sacred space. And to do this, just envision a circle drawn around you that separates you from every other living thing in the room. Now take a big, deep breath in and let it flow out of you when you exhale with a long Do this a few more times. I'd like you to actually think of a testy situation that seems to be a common occurrence with you and your person. It could be something that makes them angry or something they do that causes you to become frustrated. Are you thinking of it? Do you have something in mind? Okay, now I'd like you to do a body scan. Can you feel yourself beginning to get a little ramped up, a little agitated, just thinking about the situation? Please scan your body to identify where you feel tight or where you feel even sick. Can you send a few breaths to that area now? Please try to name the emotion you're feeling. Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it fear for your safety? Is it sadness? Name the emotion and visualize yourself holding the emotion in front of your body like a ball. I'd like you to allow that emotion to flow through you as you breathe in and you breathe out. Allow that emotion to flow through you from your head and out to the soles of your feet. Continue breathing like this for a few times, or take as long as you need until you feel that the intensity of that emotion begin to soften. Please keep on breathing at a comfortable pace to settle your nerves. If you need more time, feel free to pause the video. Otherwise, I'd like you to think about what you would like to say or do when this situation comes up again. Remember to pause a few seconds before you jump in. And also remember that sometimes the best response is nothing, meaning your approach is solely to observe, to listen, or to leave the room. Congratulations. You have just created a strategy for yourself to use later. Please stay here a little longer, just breathing gently in and out at a pace and a rate that feels good to you. Allow your breath to nourish and energize you and soothe your frazzled nerves. Importantly, don't worry if you forget to pause sometimes. You're human and living in very difficult circumstances. Just like your person, you are entitled to make mistakes. With time, increased awareness, and practice, you'll get better at this. In fact, you've probably observed how much more you know about dementia and your person's symptoms and responses than when you first started down this road. We know dementia won't get better, but you can definitely get better as you begin to pause more consistently. If you'd like to stay here for a little longer in stillness, please feel free to push the pause button. Otherwise, you can start to gently open your eyes and rejoin the group. Welcome back. Please remember today that you don't have to be perfect. Patience takes practice. Good luck today. You've definitely got this.